Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue talking about my current project of coding the combat system for a viewer's game. In particular, I'd like to talk about how we have made the field of battle, as it were, the fictional place where the battles take place, finite. So what I mean by that is, previously, the enemies could just keep retreating. They could retreat to distance 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20. They could just keep going as far as they wanted. And similarly, the player character and the companion could retreat as far back as they wanted. They could go to -10, -20, whatever. And that isn't what the viewer whose game this is going to be wanted. They wanted limits. They wanted the each set encounter to be of a particular size, and they also wanted the nature of the ends of the arena, if we're going to call it that, to sometimes be open and sometimes be closed. And what I mean by that is, in some of them, if you retreat, you can retreat back to a certain distance, and then if you retreat further, you're considered to have sort of run away and left the combat. And that's what I mean by an open end. And that can be true for the enemies. It can be true for the companions, the player character and the companions. The two ends don't have to have the same value. The other option is it can be closed, which means you can retreat back to a certain point, and then you are, as it were, your back is against the wall. You can't go back any further. So we've started to code that. We've made, as you can see, we've made the field of battle have a set size and set boundaries, and it also keeps track of whether it's open or closed at either end. It doesn't. In this particular case, it's the same value at the two ends, but they can be different, and they are different in quite a few of them. But one of the consequences of that is we are using, because we're using a relative system of notating the range bands, that creates problems. So what does a relative system mean? What I mean is that the player character is always considered to be at distance 0. Distance 0 is wherever the player character is, and then distance -1 is just 1 behind the player character. Distance 2 is 2 ahead of the player character, and so on. So if the player character moves, the same sort of fictional place will have a different name. When it's my turn, if I choose to move the player character backwards, it won't display the player character being in distance -1. It will display the player character being in distance 0, and that's considered to be the same place that used to be called distance -1, if that makes sense. And that means that we can't just say, well, distance 6 is one end and distance -3 is the other end. If the player character moves, that should change. So I'm just going to click through to the player character's turn. Okay, so as you can see, I don't have the option to advance. And that is as it should be, because there's an enemy in the range band ahead of the player character, and that's how the viewer wanted it. It originally was that the player character and the companions could sort of move freely through into the same space as the enemies and through the same space, but that's not what they wanted. They wanted the enemy to sort of block movement, and also for it to work the other way, that the companion and the player characters, the player character and the companions block the movement of the enemies. So I don't have the option to advance. I do have the option to retreat. And if I retreat, what we want to happen is that instead of this being distance 6 and this being distance 3, we want the two boundaries to be distance 7 and distance -2. So let's see if that works. And we can see that, yes, this is now distance 7, this is now distance 2, the names of the different places have changed, but the companion and the enemy are, in the fiction of the game, still where they were, but because I've moved backwards, the companion is now at distance 1 and the enemy is now at distance 2. If I retreat again, same thing should happen once we've rolled our initiative. This is now distance 8. This is now distance -1. So that's one of the things that I've done. I'll show you the other thing that I've done. I can retreat again. Obviously, retreating like this isn't a particularly good tactical move. It's just, I'm just doing it to demonstrate what's happening. I can retreat again, but that is the end of the range bands. Something special should happen when I retreat there. It should, if it's closed, it should be that I can't retreat any further. Or if it's open, which is what it is, I should be able to retreat, but retreating should end the combat from my point of view, right? I should have run away. I've sort of run away and left my companion to fight the enemy, which is a bit cowardly. But anyway, what I've coded is actually, I've only coded the option for closed boundaries. I've only coded the option where if you retreat, you can't go any further. So let's have a look at that. When I retreat, we can see that the distances change again, so that's working. And we can see that I now no longer have the option to retreat. I can advance because there's an empty space there, but I can't retreat. That's for closed. I mean, it's sort of not appropriate because this one's open, but that's how it should work for a closed boundary. And then in future videos, we're going to code how it works for an open boundary. So let's, having shown you what I've done, let's show you how the code works. I've also done something else which I didn't show you, which is I've done the final order. You might remember, if you've been following this series, that the player character has a choice of 4 orders that they can give the player characters, and if the player characters, if it's successful, because you have to roll to see if it works, but if it is successful, the player characters, the companions, sorry, will act in a different way when it's their turn, depending on what the order is. And so the 4 orders are charge, cover me, fall back, and regroup. And we'd done charge, cover me, and regroup. We hadn't done fall back. And the reason we hadn't done fall back is because fall back says go to the very back of the battlefield and stay there and fight from there, presumably with range damage. Although not always, because the enemy might be immediately in front of you if we've been sort of pushed back. But with an infinite battlefield, there is no back of the battlefield, so it wasn't possible to encode that yet. But I have encoded it. It's order number 3, and I'll show you how it works. And it's actually very simple. We had this passage for regroup and cover me, and it was called regroup/cover me. I've renamed it to regroup/cover me/fallback because fallback works in basically the same way. You can see, let me highlight 2, 3, and 4. Charge works in its own way. It works in a slightly different way. But 2, 3, and 4 all work in very similar ways. You set Z to a particular value, then you go to this page. Z is different for each order. That's the difference between the 3 orders. And Z is like a target. The companion will ask itself, am I in range band Z? And if not, it will move towards range band Z. It's just that Z is different for each of the 3 orders. And in one order, Z will be 0, so the companion will head for where the player character is. In another order, that is the regroup order. In the cover me order, the companion will head for 1 behind the player character. And in the fall back order, the companion will head for band_low, which is the current lowest range band. It's the back of the battlefield, the very edge of the battlefield. band underscore low is one of the variables that we introduced in the last video. There are no new variables for this video, but there were considerable numbers of variables introduced in the last video. Band underscore low is one of them. It's the lowest numbered range band in the current situation. And that's all we do. We just give Z a different value and we set it to this pre-existing page. I won't go through the code on this page line by line because I've done it before, but what it does is, as I said, it moves towards that range band if they're not in that range band. If they are in that range band, they pick an attack as per the default behavior. But unlike the default behavior, if that attack doesn't have a valid target, they don't move. So we just had to update this line here down the bottom of this. I might zoom in a bit. We had if $com INI underscore who 5, which is where we store the orders for the different companions. INI underscore who is a number that indicates, it stands for who has initiative, essentially. If it's on this page, it means it's a companion. And com something 5 is where the successfully given orders are stored. It used to say if this equals 2 or if it equals 4, then do this. We just had to update it to say if it equals 2 or it equals 3 or it equals 4. And if that's the case, and when we've got down here, if we're down here, then that means they've chosen an attack, but there's no enemy that they can find in range. So instead of moving, which is the default behavior, do nothing in that action. All right, so that's the orders. When the player character moves, how do we update the boundaries of the battlefield? Well, that's actually quite straightforward. All we do, we have this Z, which is because the player character is at 0. What we do within the code of the game is we move. If the player character moves forward, we move everyone else backwards, and that gives the same effect. If the player character retreats, we move everyone else forward 1. And all we do is we also change band underscore low or band underscore high. Sorry, band underscore low and band underscore high, which are the lowest range band and the highest range band that we're going to display and that are the ends of the battlefield. We just add that same amount to them that we're adding to the enemies and the companions. All right, so the final thing I want to show you is taking away the ability to retreat from the player character if they're at the very back of the battlefield, which again is only appropriate for closed battlefields. We have to, in future videos, we're going to have to add some more code to account for open battlefields. But let's show you how we do what we do. It's in player character. So all we do is this. We had this button which has the text retreat, sends us to PC moves with a value of Z equal to 1, just as advance sends us to PC moves with a different value of Z. And that always executed when we were on this page. Now it only executes if band underscore low is less than 0. So why is that the thing that we, why is that the test that we apply? Well, band underscore low is the lowest value range band that we're going to print. It is the very end, it's the sort of player character's far end of the battlefield. And remember that the player character is always at 0. So if band low and 0 are the same value, well, that means the player character is at the very far end of the battlefield. And if they're at the very far end of the battlefield, and it's a closed battlefield, or it's closed on that end, well, then we don't want to print the option to retreat. So we only print the option if band low is less than 0. If we have a distance -1 at least underneath the player character. Although it's that, when I say underneath, I mean in the display that we're currently using, and you should bear in mind that that display is not going to be the final version. That's not what's intended. We want a first-person display, but because that's quite complicated, that's going to be the very last thing that we do. But so we only execute that if band_low is less than 0, meaning that the player is not at the very end of their end of the battlefield. And that is how we do the things that I showed you, as well as fixing this little problem with the orders, that we hadn't quite finished the orders. There's a lot of other stuff we have to do. We have to put a similar limit on the enemies, and we haven't done that yet. And we also have to account for open battlefields. If there's an open battlefield, then the player character should be able to retreat when they're at the very end, but the retreating should have a different effect. The retreating is running away, basically. It's leaving the battle entirely. And similarly, if an enemy is at their end of the battlefield and retreats, well, they don't just go back one. They are considered to have sort of run away and left the battle entirely as well. So that's what we're probably going to look at next. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.